They laughed at her, mocked her clothes, her walk, her silence, thinking she was just another nobody at the bottom of the ladder. She didn't wear designer heels or carry a branded bag. She didn't speak with the loud polish they were used to, and that made her, in their eyes, invisible, irrelevant. They whispered behind her back, smirked openly, and asked if she was there to drop off food or apply for a janitorial shift. But the woman they humiliated wasn't applying for a job. She was preparing to take over the company they worked for. The one they flaunted like a personal kingdom was about to have a new ruler. And she didn't come dressed for attention. She came dressed for truth. Tell us where you're watching from, and if you've ever seen Karma walk into a room wearing jeans, you'll want to hear this one. Amara Fields walked into the towering glass building like a shadow, quiet, unnoticed, and unbothered. At 29, she had built her first business from a single laptop in a studio apartment with peeling paint and a leaky sink. Now, she was a multi-millionaire, a strategic investor who didn't care for limelight or labels. She wore a plain white t-shirt, high-waisted jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days. Her long hair was pulled back simply, no designer handbag swinging from her arm, no assistant trailing behind her. That was intentional. Amara had come to observe, not to announce. She had recently acquired a majority share in the very company, housed inside this polished skyscraper, a deal made quietly through layers of shell firms and legal proxies. No one in the building knew she was the new owner, and that's exactly how she wanted it. In the lobby, a small group of executives gathered near the elevators, their expensive fabrics catching the morning light like armor. Lauren, Blake, Savannah, and their tightly knit clique were the faces of the company, smiling in all the brochures, shaking hands at galas, radiating privilege they never had to earn. To them, image wasn't just important, it was everything. They moved like they owned the air around them, greeting each other with performative laughter and backhanded compliments, sipping overpriced coffees with names longer than their titles. When Amara passed by, their glances were automatic and dismissive. She was clearly not one of them. The way she dressed, the way she didn't try to impress anyone, it made her invisible in their world. The lobby, though bathed in sunlight, and filled with art installations and marble accents, felt cold. It was sterile success, a place where warmth was replaced with polish, where kindness didn't belong in the business model. Amara moved through it without a word, her eyes absorbing every detail. She wasn't just walking into a building. She was walking into a culture she now controlled. But before she could change anything, she needed to see what power looked like when it thought no one important was watching. And as she passed the group that would soon learn who she really was, she offered no smile, no explanation, only a calm gaze that saw everything. Amara paused for a moment near the VIP entrance, scanning the sleek silver directory on the wall, pretending to look for a name she already knew by heart. The moment she stopped moving, the whispers began. Lauren was the first to notice her, her carefully sculpted brows arching with amusement as she elbowed Blake, who followed her gaze and smirked. Savannah's laugh was soft but sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. She looked so lost. Lauren said loudly enough for Amara to hear. Maybe she's here to deliver lunch or refill the vending machine. Blake leaned in, voice dripping with condescension. You okay there? You need help finding the service entrance? The group chuckled in sync, their perfect teeth flashing like a well-rehearsed performance. No one offered genuine assistance. No one asked her name. They just saw a woman who didn't look like them, and assumed she didn't belong. The receptionist behind the front desk didn't bother to hide her disinterest either. She barely glanced up when Amara approached, too preoccupied laughing along with the group. "You're not allowed past this point without clearance," she said flatly, eyes flicking to Amara's worn sneakers with a twitch of judgment. Amara offered no defense, no clarification. She simply nodded and stepped back, her eyes locking on each person in the group, one by one. She took in their faces, their voices, the smug way they stood like nothing could touch them. Her silence wasn't submission. It was storage. Every insult, every glance, every assumption. They were all being recorded in a place no security camera could reach. Then, without a word, Amara turned toward the frosted glass doors behind the reception desk. Doors marked Executive Access Only. She pulled a small, thin card from her back pocket, one that the receptionist hadn't noticed. With a soft beep, the doors unlocked. The group fell silent mid-snicker, watching in confusion as she disappeared behind them, leaving nothing but the echo of her quiet composure behind. An hour later, phones buzzed. The group of executives stood around Lauren's desk, each reading the same message at once. Mandatory all-staff meeting, Boardroom A, immediate attendance required. No one knew who had sent it. There was no signature, no department code, just a simple subject line that made their stomachs twist. Leadership Update. The boardroom buzzed with low chatter as the group gathered around the long mahogany table, still riding the high of their morning cruelty. Lauren sat confidently at the center, legs crossed, recounting the strange little moment with the girl from the lobby. She looked like she'd taken the wrong train and ended up in the middle of a Fortune 500 company, she said with a laugh. Blake added, "You should have seen her face, like she'd never seen glass doors before." Even Savannah joined in, mimicking Amara's walk as the others chuckled. None of them noticed the tension seeping into the room as more staff filed in. Quietly, curiously, no one quite sure why they had been summoned. The clock ticked. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. No sign of the CEO. No explanation. Just a screen. At the front of the room, waiting to light up. Finally, the doors opened, and the room fell quiet. Amara stepped in. Same jeans, same t-shirt, same quiet expression. No assistant, no briefcase. Just her. The shift in energy was immediate. Lauren straightened in her seat. Blake furrowed his brow. Savannah blinked twice, unsure if they were being pranked. Amara didn't flinch. She walked slowly to the head of the table, placed her phone on the center panel and tapped the screen. The overhead projector hummed to life, casting a crisp image across the wall. Purchase agreement. Final transfer of ownership. Beneath it, the name was unmistakable. Amara L. Fields. The room gasped in perfect unison. She didn't look up immediately. She let the silence settle, let the weight of the realization sink deep into their bones. Pages flipped across the screen, signatures, wire confirmations, dates, legal stamps. By the time Amara raised her eyes, the room was dead quiet. "I bought this company," she said, her voice soft but unwavering, "because I believe in second chances. I believe in building something better, something that values people beyond their appearance or wardrobe." She paused, letting the silence breathe. "I just didn't realize the first thing I'd have to do was clean house." No one moved. The air was thick with disbelief and shame. The same people who had mocked her now sat frozen, stripped of their superiority. Amara hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't changed clothes. She hadn't needed a title to command attention. She simply stood there, calm and certain, and flipped the entire hierarchy on its head. Power had shifted, and there was no going back. Amara took a breath, her gaze sweeping slowly across the boardroom table, pausing just long enough to let each face feel the weight of her words. Some of you may be wondering why I came in the way I did, why I didn't show up in a suit or send a memo ahead of time. Her voice remained steady, almost gentle, but every syllable landed with unshakable clarity. It's because I've walked these halls before, not as an owner, not even as an employee. My mother was a janitor in this very building. For years, I used to wait in the basement while she cleaned your offices late at night. I watched her scrub the floors you walked on, the ones you barely noticed, and I watched the way people like her were treated, looked through, talked down to, laughed at. A stunned silence settled over the room. Not a breath, not a shuffle. The confident posturing from earlier had disappeared, replaced with tightened jaws and lowered eyes. Amara continued, her tone still calm but laced with quiet fire. I built my first business from scratch, failed 3 times, slept on couches, ate instant noodles for months, but I kept going. I learned, I grew, and eventually I sold that company and used the proceeds to invest. Over the last few years, I watched this company from the outside, watched the culture shift, watched the humanity bleed out of it, watched people get promoted for charm and cruelty rather than talent and heart. She tapped the screen again, this time revealing internal complaints, leaked reviews, and exit interviews that had long been ignored. So, I made a decision. I bought a controlling share, quietly, and this morning I walked in like someone, invisible to you, because I wanted to see if anything had changed. Her eyes met Lauren's, then Blake's, then Savannah's. None of them could look back at her. But one person, she said, turning to the screen again, did treat me with dignity. The receptionist downstairs didn't know who I was. She just saw someone standing alone and decided to be kind. She gestured to the screen, now showing a photo of the woman. Her name is Diane. She'll be joining our leadership development track starting next week. Then came the shift. As for the rest of you, effective immediately, you're on probation pending full review. Your titles don't protect you. Neither do your connections. If you believe in this company, prove it. If you don't, there's the door. She started to gather her phone but paused, just long enough to deliver the final blow. And next time you judge someone by their clothes, she said quietly, remember, you can't measure worth by a label. In the weeks that followed Amara's stunning revelation, change didn't roar through the company. It unfolded like a quiet revolution. Subtle at first, but unstoppable. Gone were the performative posters about workplace equality, taped to glass walls while behind closed doors, judgment thrived. Gone were the leadership retreats that excluded those who couldn't afford the look of success. Amara didn't just rebrand the company, she rebuilt its values from the ground up. She began with culture, not performance metrics. Her first executive order dissolved the old leadership committee entirely. Not one of the former clique remained. In their place, she invited employees from the margins, those who had gone years without a voice, the ones who worked through lunch breaks, who stayed late without asking for credit, who knew the company better than anyone because they had held it together in silence. One of the new department heads had once been a receptionist who remembered every name and birthday. Another had started in maintenance but carried a degree no one had cared to ask about. Titles were no longer crowns. They were responsibilities. Amara walked the floors often. She spoke to teams herself, not through assistants. She asked people what they needed and actually listened. An idea submission box appeared in every hallway, anonymous, open, and reviewed by her directly. For the first time, people who had trained themselves to stay invisible now found their thoughts posted on office walls, their ideas implemented, their names read aloud in meetings. No more whispering behind closed doors. Transparency became a standard. Respect became policy. And power, it was redefined. For those who had mocked her, the ones who had laughed at her clothes, sneered at her silence, consequences were swift but fair. Blake was removed from his leadership role and asked to reapply for a junior position under new management. Savannah resigned quietly after failing the new empathy-based leadership evaluation. Lauren tried to apologize publicly, but it rang hollow, in the face of how many voices she had previously silenced. She was let go, not out of revenge, but out of integrity. The company couldn't move forward with leaders who refused to grow. New faces appeared in the office, but they weren't just new hires. They were people with new energy. A woman in a headscarf led the innovation team. A man who stuttered but coded brilliantly became lead developer. Former interns were brought back with full-time offers. The walls that had once echoed with polished exclusion now hummed with possibility, and, through it all, Amara remained unchanged in appearance. She still wore her simple jeans and neutral t-shirts, still sipped her coffee with no sugar, still carried her worn leather notebook filled with handwritten reflections. She never took on the image others expected of power. Instead, she allowed her leadership to speak for itself. She didn't care for flashy offices or designer labels. Her new corner office was filled with natural light, a round table instead of a desk, and shelves of books on ethics, innovation, and the forgotten art of listening. One particular afternoon, when the building had quieted and most employees had headed home, Amara invited someone special to see it all. Her mother. She hadn't stepped foot in the building in nearly 15 years. The moment they walked in, something shifted in her eyes. Recognition mixed with disbelief. Amara walked her through the main floor, introducing her not as my mom, but as the woman who showed me what real work looks like. They passed executives who stood to greet her with respect, not performative politeness, and then, as they reached a familiar hallway, her mother stopped. She looked at a small metal door near the janitor's closet. Her fingers brushed the edge of it like it held ghosts. "This was it," she whispered, her voice soft with memory. "This is where I used to leave you. You were just a little girl with crayons and crackers, sitting on a mop bucket while I cleaned offices." Amara stood beside her, their hands now linked. "Now," Amara said gently, "you're standing in the building your daughter owns." Tears welled in both their eyes. There were no speeches, no photos, just a sacred pause, filled with the kind of pride that doesn't need to be spoken. Later that evening, Amara returned to her office. She placed a framed picture of her mother near the window, beside a small plaque engraved with a single word: worth. She sat down, not behind a desk that towered over others, but at the same glass table she had chosen intentionally, one where no one sat higher than the other. She opened her notebook and wrote quietly, then leaned back, watching the city lights flicker. She still wore the same plain clothes, but no one mistook her for anything less than what she was. Because true power doesn't need permission to be seen. It doesn't ask to be acknowledged. It arrives quietly, observes, and when the moment is right, it rewrites the room. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Amara stepped out onto the lobby floor. Calm, poised, her coat folded neatly over one arm. The same group that had once mocked her now stood off to the side, no longer laughing, no longer bold. Their eyes followed her, wide with silent recognition, their once slick confidence now replaced by humbled stillness. Amara didn't glance their way. She didn't need to. Her stride was steady, her gaze forward. Every step echoed the truth they had failed to see, that power doesn't always arrive in tailored suits or with loud introductions. Sometimes it walks in wearing plain clothes, listens in silence, and leaves with the keys to everything. As she pushed through the glass doors and into the sunlight, the air seemed to shift. She didn't need to make a statement. Her presence had already rewritten the narrative. They dressed for power, but she became it. Have you ever watched someone turn humiliation into history? If this story moved you, share it with someone who's been underestimated, someone who's been told they don't look the part. And don't forget to follow for more stories of quiet strength, earned power, and justice that doesn't ask permission.